Welcome, everybody. This is Rocks and Clouds Zendo Wednesday night Dharma talk and meditation. We have a wonderful gift tonight. A dear friend of mine, Ryushin Andrea Thach, who is a Dharma heir of Sojun Roshi, who founded Berkeley Zen Center, and who's an absolutely prolific and wonderful and very beloved teacher who passed this year, but has left a legacy of a powerful Zendo and a wonderful, I think you could say, cadre of students of much depth and capacity. Andrea began practicing in the 80s in Vipassana style, moved over to Zen and studied in the Zen tradition under Sojun Roshi, where she got Dharma transmission, and has also studied multiple contexts since then. She's a palliative care doctor in her daily life and brings presence and her practice into her connection with her colleagues, her patients, and in her work, and is going to share a little bit from the depth of her practice on how do we bring this presence into how we cultivate our life. How do we bring it into our relationships, how we engage with work and family. And Andrea has been a true gift in my life, and I'm glad that you all get to meet her. And with no further ado, I'll pass over to Ryushin Andrea Thach, and hope that I'm saying that first name accurately. And you're muted, Ryushin.
Mike, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? Is the volume loud enough? Great, thank you. I haven't done a talk on Zoom for a while since we've been back in person, so I'm getting re-familiar with how to juggle the technology. And I wanted just to start by making an offering here to help create the space of the talk a little bit. Guess I should light the candle. And okay. So it's really a pleasure to get to meet all of you. Mike has, as you may know, been also practicing with Berkeley Zen Center somewhat, so that's how we've gotten to know each other. But we also have shared workplaces to a certain extent, and we have served some of the same communities and have a connection that way as well. I'm grateful to Mike for giving me the topic to speak to you about, and I'm understand that your Wednesday nights are often rather informal, so I am intending a talk that is warm and connecting with you, with lots of time to share your own experiences of presence and presence in your work, whether you're still working now for pay or not, and whether you're an Uber driver or a vet tech or an accountant or a lawyer, or whatever it is that you do or have done, a caregiver for someone that you love, a caregiver to your own body, perhaps as you age. All of those circumstances are met with some presence. So today for me was a particularly hard and long day at work. I blew my cover by telling you that I'm a palliative medicine physician. So you can imagine that my work is with people for whom presence is really a staple for what it is that I do with them. But today reminds me of in my career, all the tens of thousands of people, their families, my co-workers who really are here in this talk with us in our Zoom temple, and their voices are speaking along with me and sharing this experience with you. So I'm going to start with a little story about loosely centered on someone that we worked with in my team, and start with it and end with it. So I won't use names. Maybe it seemed like it might be nice to make it kind of generic so that you can put yourself in that circumstance. So it's, not about this person, but it's about a doctor and a social worker who are asked as part of their work to go to a family's home and to take care of a mother who is in her mid-70s, but pretty aged for being mid-70s. She's had a difficult life. She is as alert as can be, but not necessarily fully cognitively there, but still very engaging, very alive, very strong in her sense of herself and her opinions about things. And she's essentially bedbound because she's been living with a cancer for a very long time, and although she's done quite well with her cancer, it has affected and has not been well controlled in her leg, and so she can't walk. So she holds court, so to speak, from her bed. And her family, who share her home with her, come in and provide some care, but mainly she holds court in her sense of her life in her room. Her daughter, one of her children, but the child who really looks in on her, also a mature woman who has a busy work life, comes over at the end of that work day and spends the rest of the day with her, managing her medications with great facility, and obviously knows her mother well and cares about her in an incredibly competent way. And in our time and getting to know them, we establish a fair amount of rapport. The social worker provides support in respite caregiver relief. The daughter's very, very grateful for that. The doctor uses her hands and her touch and her presence in the home to provide some reassurance that the mother is well cared for. And we do our best to do this in a way that is respectful and they feel well heard. So we know we're taught a lot about this in our practice. And I can imagine that you all have studied at least once, twice, or many times Case 64 of the Book of Serenity, which is the Soto Zen Book of Koans. Do you all use the Book of Serenity? Yeah. So
it's the second to last book in our training sequence, right before Dongshan's 5 rings.
Thank you. We don't have such a set liturgy. Zen is Soto Zen is the farmer's practice. So we tend to be more of an apprenticeship, but the Book of Serenity is a koan book that we study out of, and a small group of us actually have been making a practice of that for the last several years. So you know Unmon's great compassion well, and I just want to point to a few thoughts that I've had as I've been thinking about presence. So as you know, two good Dharma brothers, people who practice together a long time, and they're always having fun with each other. I've come to see them not as one is the one who knows everything and one is kind of struggling from behind, but they both have their different way in, and they're constantly mirroring each other and learning from each other. And they do hear when they're talking about how is it that the Bodhisattva of great compassion uh, knows what to do. What is that instinctive knowing of what to do really all about? Right? And one of them says, Yunyan says, well, you know, there's, yeah, look, I see that there are arms all over. You know, there are arms all over, arms and ears and all kinds of senses all over, and that's how Kuan Yin does it. So, you know, we aspire to be Kuan Yin. We've got eyes. I see the patient. I see the facial expressions. I have hands. I touch the warm leg. I feel the infection or the inflammation in it. The touch itself is healing. We listen with our voices. We see the facial expressions on the daughter's face. We have some sense of her confidence, her fatigue, her worry for her mother. We take all of those in through our senses. That's how we experience each other. We experience each other through our five senses and all the five skandhas, through feelings and perceptions, through our ideas and the ways in which we process those ideas, and from our sincere wishes and our intentions as practitioners practicing the precepts and aspiring to be bodhisattvas. That's how we take in the world and respond. So we do forge a relationship of trust, both physically and psychosocially. And maybe from that, some healing actually happens. That's the kind of presence in which healing often happens. And I do believe that people do that even as they serve a cup of Pete's coffee at the coffee bar, or as the car mechanic reassures you that, you know, and discusses with you how your car was well taken care of. There's a way of responding to, showing confidence that actually is meeting a person in that moment. But it's a little bit tricky, I think, to actually use these senses in a way that clearly receives the other. Because in that moment of perception and cognition, also our own ideas based on our own experience come in, and they can color, they can shape how we put together a situation. I have to say that happens in my profession all the time. I see many different cases of a certain kind of illness. I have a pretty good sense, perhaps, of what's going on for that person. And that's necessary. You know, you have in a long career, each of you, even as a Zen teacher or a long-time Zen practitioner, you have a certain mastery, if you will, and our ability requires on that intuition, which is based on experience. But that experience can be a coloration or can lead to preconceived ideas in which we actually miss who it is that we're talking to. Oh, I can tell you another great story of a patient when I was a young doctor, and I made a brilliant diagnosis, actually brilliant diagnosis on a wonderful old man, a rancher, whose gnarled hands caught my eye, and they were quite disabling to him. And I sent him off from the rural hospital where I worked off to the tertiary care center in Seattle. And he came back some months later, furious with me. because for all my touch and hearing and actual real care about him, I obviously still have a mental image of him. He was furious with me because I'd missed his diagnosis of lung cancer. And that little cough, which had seemed nothing to me, was actually where his problem was. So our preconceived ideas or our experience can get in our way. So as you know, Dao Wu says, that's it's pretty good that you're using all of those senses and all of your cognition and everything else to evaluate the situation. But it's not quite it. It's not quite it. The it is throughout the body, right? So that is, what is that really? That intuition where we go deeper in, perhaps, outside the bias of our professional role, and we recognize and see our proclivities, right? We have some understanding. We never get rid of our karmic ways of seeing things, our conditioned ways of seeing things, but they come in sharper focus, and we're not hooked by them or caught up by them in the same way as we used to be. A policeman might know that he's prone to a hot temper. And so in a situation, he may be actually much more likely to calm himself and not react because he recognizes that if he is a practitioner. A person who is a bit of a flirt at the coffee bar may rein that in a little bit when he finds himself being a little bit too familiar. Those kinds of recognitions of what we bring that's extra to the situation. My teacher had a very helpful way of looking at this. One time we were all sitting around, I think we spent several senior student meetings talking about how we do practice discussion, how we do spiritual direction, and wanting some kind of formal instruction or a course or something. He didn't say a word for all of these. And as we rattled on the second meeting, he at the end of it said, "I don't know why you all are saying all this. Just dig deeper. Just dig deeper." What he meant was, get down below your ideas of what's happening. Let go of your ideas about what's happening completely. Let your ideas go completely. We'd say in our practice place, practice from your hara. Go deep in your belly. When a situation doesn't seem clear, or maybe when you think you know it too well, go down to that deeper place, the place that may feel a little bit shaky, or a little uncertain, or a little uncomfortable because you don't know what to say or what to do exactly, and reside there, and open from there, and don't know from there, and receive. Receive, like reaching for a pillow in the middle of the night. Somehow you know how to adjust it. But it's in some ways you're not trying to make it happen. You can't make it happen because, well, I'll say more about this, because it's beyond your usual ways of thinking or your usual ways of experience. Maybe you've had that experience in your lives as practitioners and as people in the world where you have a response that seems to come from someplace you have no idea of. And it's not that it's not shaped by your years of practice or by your years doing whatever it is that you've done, living with your spouse and knowing what he or she needs in the moment, living with your child and having some sense of what they are asking for, really. Or having a sense of a situation that you've been at work a million times and you just know, here's where I step back and let this unfold. So that made a lot of sense to me, what Sojun said. He always instructed us to have a question. The question was what? What? Like, what is it? Or what's happening now? To have an open mind or a beginner's mind, we'd say a soft and open, receptive mind, a mind of wonder, not knowing. Particularly in those times, in those situations where maybe it's a little uncomfortable or tense or uncertain, or the person you're relating to seems a little lost and you're not sure how to connect with them. To have a mind of wonder, to settle into your breath and in your heart, hara, and just ask what. We operate on a human level, on the relative level, and we can only function out of our 5 skandhas of form, sensations, perceptions, mental activity, consciousness, and allow them to operate, if you will, throughout the body in this way. Perhaps it means to function unencumbered by their usual role. Chant with your ears, listen with your hands, feel with your eyes, sense with your nose. Open up all the doors of sensation and receive them, not in the usual ways you think about them. It expands them. It's one of the reasons that people who've lost a sense become so much more acute in their other senses. They learn to use their other senses as the eyes that have been blinded or the ears that no longer hear. I think I finally had some real understanding this from my other teacher, Shohaku Okumura, in a dokusan that I had with him some years ago. Shohaku-san hates doing dokusan. He really won't do it with people unless there's a really good reason. And for those of us who would travel from a distance to his place in Bloomington, he would allow us to come up after the teaching retreat was over to his office, and we'd sit just as we're sitting together tonight, face to face across a table in his library with his books all around. And we'd have a conversation. And this time, many years ago, I can't remember the question I brought to him, but it was something of a younger troubled person who was trying to work through the same tangled knot of her life, trying to understand kind of how to let it go. And he sat very still, and he looked at me maybe just a little bit like he wasn't sure what he should do. And he said so honestly to me, he said, I'm a Japanese man, American woman. I don't have any familiarity with this circumstance. And then he proceeded to tell me about a troubled time in his life when he was very young, before he came to practice. A story that I had heard maybe 3 or 4 times before in different venues with him, about how he found his teacher, basically was the story. And I'm listening to him so earnestly and carefully tell me this story, and I'm thinking to myself, I really want an answer. I really want some help here. Oh, and all he's doing is telling me the same story again. And when he finished, not literally but figuratively, he handed my question back to him. And to my amazement, it was totally changed. It no longer bothered me. I didn't have an answer. It's not that the kind of idea about it had changed, but fundamentally it was different. And I've come to understand that there was a way in which he held my question, kind of held it in his care, that radically transformed it. I think that that is maybe even beyond what Dao Wu and Yun Yan are talking about. It's something deeper in where we truly let go of all of our ideas, where we're not doing it alone. We're really allowing the other person's experience and their being to inform us. In the Lotus Sutra, there's a very famous saying in chapter 12, I think, that only a Buddha together with a Buddha can realize the Buddha way. It's the same section where the Lotus Sutra talks about how each of us has our own form. I'll read it to you. Only a Buddha together with a Buddha can fathom the reality of all existence. That is to say, all existence has such a form, such a nature, such an embodiment, such a potency, such a function, such a primary cause, such a secondary cause, such an effect, such a recompense, and such a complete fundamental whole. So all of kind of what we come into this world with, our proclivities, our energy, our physical form, our biologic tendencies, our experiences, the causes and conditions we've been met with, how we've responded, all of that comes together into the whole dynamic working of this person. And only that, together with another, can actually bring forth the Dharma, because each of our views, of course, is limited. Each of our views can only see through that fundamental whole. It has gaps. But together, in this moment of reality, we can better create it. And that's what I think was in action in that Dokusan with Okumura Roshi, that his total dynamic function was meeting with mine in some fundamental way. And that created some insight. Refers to being able to see the reality of things as they are, because our own view will never be complete. It's not that there is, in some magic moment, a smart Buddha, or the real Buddha, or the authentic Buddha. But it's really that there's Buddha throughout our body of reality, throughout, and that includes our diluted Buddha, our limited Buddha. All of that is functioning, and we need each other to actualize real presence, real connection. I was interested that not long ago I listened to a conversation about dignity. So I think dignity is really about a person's sense of dignity. Research has shown is about a person being seen. Is it about a person's appearance, who they really are, who they understand themselves to be, is what is being seen. And that our connection in that way with another is what brings forth that sense of wholeness in them. So I want to end my talk by talking about what happened with this mother and daughter and our experience. So we went on caring for her for a few years, actually. And then at some point, her cancer in her leg began to progress, and the treatments weren't working anymore, but she was still doing pretty well. She wound up getting sick, though. She developed a severe infection, and the hospitalization was complicated by a heart attack and Her kidneys started to give out because, in fact, her body was failing, but also some things were done in the hospital to try and help her that didn't appear to be helping her. It seemed to be making her worse, even though it was her disease process that was giving way. Her daughter, who had been very attentive, knew her very well, had always said, I'll be the one to make a decision about what her care should be, and I'm not satisfied with what's happening. And so over time, over a long hospitalization of several weeks, the hospital staff and she were at loggerheads. She was insistent that what was being done was not enough. And they were insistent that she only came in late in the day. She wanted them to do other things. She didn't really care about her mother. She was being unreasonable because her mother was an old lady whose mind didn't work completely well and her cancer was progressing. And that's how things stood. We don't usually go into the hospital, but the social worker and the doctor went into the hospital and sat down with the daughter who really trusted them. They sat down for probably 2.5 hours. They listened to the story of what had happened in the hospital. They listened to the story of how they had been received and what the conversations had been. The daughter was, we knew, a deacon in her church and a very settled spiritual person. And so there was not animosity or even righteous anger, but there was clarity. There was truly grounded clarity about her experience, which we could see and we could recognize and we could hold up with her and we could mirror back the karmic experience that she had had over so many years, that they had had over so many years. And we could sort through what had happened in the hospital and where her mother really was. And she could come to peace and taking her mother home. So for me, that was an instance of sitting in the light with her, and together we opened to each other and were able to meet the circumstances. So that's what I wanted to offer tonight to you. I'd be very curious as to how that landed and what you think and what your own experiences are. And I'd really enjoy hearing kind of your own reaction either to the talk or really to how you bring forward presence in your practice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryushin Andrea Thach. Sensei, I really appreciate your talk and the depth that you bring to both your work and your practice, and how there's such a interweaving between the two. Do you want people to bow first and then ask a question? Do you want, how would you want to manage the questions for you?
What's your usual form? What are you comfortable doing? I'm fine with people just kind of speaking or raising your hands or you calling on the mic, but what would you like to do?
We usually let it be a little bit alive, and so it looks like Jay has energy and might have a question.
Oh, no, I wasn't jumping in there. I was going to say we just like take it as it comes.
Great. That family style works really well.
Okay, well, I'll jump in there a little bit. I really like the way that you brought the idea of presence into the body and into the moment and into your work and your daily life, right? And it's kind of interesting that we can take ourselves too seriously with that, and we have to do all this and that and whatever, and often just being present is enough, and the situation kind of can work itself out a little bit more organically. So for me, after practicing, I have been able to bring the idea of, you know, just finding my breath in the moment and being with that moment rather than, like you're saying, hey, I got a preconceived notion or whatever, and get out of the way, really. And I work with a staff of people, and it's wonderful to let that come out of the woodwork and not have to hold it too tight or have to work it too much, but enough to be there and enough to facilitate the situation, but to get out of the way. And it's like when it seems hard when you're in some, like I hear you're a palliative care doctor, and that can be a big thing, or it can just be what I do. And I think you really framed that. Whether you're a mechanic or you're bringing a cup of coffee or you're a brain surgeon, we bring our presence there, right? Well, and what I notice for me is when it starts to get hard for me, there is some kind of this delusion of what I'm supposed to do, what I'm tense, how it's going to work out, rather than listening and just putting out the fire or eating a chip or whatever you really need to do. So, and Nettie even talked about this or brought this up last week with not getting too high or too low with anything, but just being with what it is, right? And that comes back down to that presence of what is it, you know? So I really appreciate your heartful, gentle approach, because I understand kind of what your life looks like, you know, in that way. And to have that open heart is just really, really sweet. So thank you for sharing with Rocks and Clouds today. It's beautiful.
Yeah, Jay, thank you very much for your comments. I think you touched on something that I think is really important that I didn't articulate exactly, and that is trust. I think that as a manager or whatever you do, that idea of you trust in the intelligence, the ability of the individuals and of the situation to kind of work itself out or reveal itself. And I feel like very much in what I do, it's a matter of really a trust in the deep knowledge a person has, whether conscious or unconscious, of what's important to them and who they are. And our work is really about touching that place, getting to know them well enough that we have some sense of that if they've lost track of that in the midst of their terrible illness, we can help them, we can help point them or remind them in ways or open the door to those ways for them again, and really trust them to find their wholeness through the situation. It looks very different for different people.
Yeah, we're not going to make it happen. It has to happen.
That's right. And the way we'd make it happen isn't the way that's the right way for them to make it happen. Yeah. Yeah. Other folks, did this touch on anything that you value, or as a thank you for sitting through to the end and being here? Tell me something about your experience of this in your own life. And please unmute. Oh, Carol.
Oh, you called on me. I was muttering under my breath. I don't want to tell you because it's too painful. That was what I was saying right then.
Thank you for offering that.
And you saw my lips moving and called on me, so maybe I could tell you, maybe. My husband died 2.5 weeks ago. And so what is happening is so vast and so incomprehensible. And the people around me in our family who also loved my husband tremendously are also experiencing this vast, incomprehensible thing, and it's wiping out some of our parts of our mind. We forget things. Or the sensors on our ordinary speech are gone and we say things. So unforgivable things have been said and done in my family, and they have to be forgiven. And I'm just sitting with that and feeling like if I can't forgive them, then I'll be stuck in this very brittle, rigid place that's defended against everything I love and everything I care about, and I can't do it. I'm stuck. And we're talking about this presence, and I don't know what this has to do with presence, but I was feeling like if I could just get there, then maybe this awful drama wouldn't be happening now.
Maybe it's about being willing to be really present to your grief, really, really present to the loss and how deep that is. It's hard to heal and to open until you have until you've lived with that for a long enough period of time.
I lost you. I was hearing you, and then my mind went somewhere else, and I didn't hear exactly what you said. Could you just say it again?
Yeah, I'll say something again, which is, I think, in the midst. Did someone else want to say something? In the midst of deep grief, where emotion is so strong, you said it so beautifully. A person's mind goes out. You forget things. You say things. You have such strong emotion, unexplained emotion. Those are the winds and fires of grief. You have to be willing to sit in that and just experience and live with it, to allow the other feelings to find their place. And the other people too, the other members of your family who are also experiencing this terrible loss. You don't have to solve it now. You don't have to solve it now. You'll find the forgiveness when the time is right. Condolences and well wishes. Thank you for speaking.
I'm going to speak again. This week I had an interaction with somebody that they received a foster baby that was 2 weeks old about 8 months ago. And there's another baby in the family, and totally fell in love with this little baby. It was a baby that was taken away from a drug addicted mother. And over the period of time in the court system, whatever, the family has stepped forward. And yesterday, it was yesterday or the day before, at work, she came to me. She couldn't speak, and she was in total tears. And I just said, you need to go, you know? And she walked out the door. And then she texted me. She said, they're taking my baby. And I have to go home and pack up for her and spend the last amount of time with her, right? And then we kept communicating, you know, in a verbal way. And it's like, I communicated, it's like, I know it really, really hurts, and I can feel those tears, but I feel so much love too. And that love will get you through that. And facing this opens the love. And so those tears are opening up your heart, right? And she said to me later, she said, you know, in that situation, often nothing will really help, but that helped, you know? And it was presence, really. It's like, and then she said later, she says, I may cry. I said, then do it. Cry, right? You know, and when Carol, when you were talking, I felt your heart opening, actually. You know, so the tears are, and Danielle talked about this too as well, is like, the tears aren't bad. It's, you'll feel it, right? You know, so anyway.
Thank you, Jay. You're beautiful.
You know, that's just it. It is beautiful to engage in reality. So beautiful. Doesn't mean you're not going to cry.
Or be pissed as hell.
Who is that?
I said, or be pissed as hell. That was Mike.
It clears the air. Reality clears the air. You can see what there really is, and then you can deal with it and have your real emotions.
Carol, over the last couple of months, as your husband was failing, you got stronger every single week. You had more resolve in your face. You were more present. You really gained a huge amount of strength over that period of time. And I just wanted to let you know it was visible. So thank you.
Really the depth and the power of presence. Bill, I can't tell if you're, Bill Blackburn, I can't tell if you're leaning in to say something or if you're just leaning in.
Were you speaking to me, Mike?
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if you wanted to say something. It looked like you might.
I do, but I feel so unsure of my trying to articulate my thoughts and my feelings and so forth. And I mean, you know, since Gregory's since this whole time of his dying and his actual passing, I've gone through a lot of feeling, a lot of searching, I guess you might say. Also, it's been a lot of turmoil inside, and I guess quite a few tears for me anyway. Um, we Patty and I went to a concert last night with Judy Collins, and it somehow just so many feelings came up for me, and I found myself thinking about Gregory and Carol also, and and just I don't know, was wondering more and more what it's all about, and you know, trying to get more to the bottom of it, I guess, as Ryushin was speaking of, to get, you know, below my own ideas and feelings, and I think that's what she's saying. It was I oh I don't know, we're just going through a lot, and um yeah, and I agree with Jay. I've seen Carol become apparently stronger over the last few weeks. And I also see her feeling very weak and helpless, and um, um, yeah, I don't know, just wanting to help, but not knowing how, except like, you know, listening and hearing and doing my best just to be there. This is, before I ever was practicing Zen, I I worked as a therapist a lot. I worked with a lot of kids in the schools. They were frequently the kids, difficult kids. Sometimes nobody thought that anybody could work with, which I was always a great challenge for me. But I found that what helped was not any rarely a traditional kind of approach, but just understanding, trying to realize, to see who they were and be there for them on their plane. I mean, some kids needed to just run out in the snow and things and like that. But it all came down to being present and 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 I didn't think of it that way so much as but as being trying to hear who they were. And now I try to do this in my life and trying to do it with myself. And that is an interesting challenge sometimes. And I found, oh, now there my mind's going blank. I don't know, but that has been very rewarding. And a lot of these people I've worked with, I have no idea if I really help them, but I do run into them now and then, and they frequently say, "Hi, hey, Bill," and that's a reward for me. So I'll keep on trying to relate to people that way, whether they are, whoever they are. I mean, people panhandling, on the corners, it it helps me at least, and I hope it helps them to try to get some idea of who they are, see their reality, their suffering, and not so easy. I mean, a lot of people out there, and they need money, and I don't want to give it to them always, but I give them a little bit, and but trying to just be there on the same plane of existence. We're all here in the same boat, I don't know where I'm going with this, but thank you.
I should think we all think that's really beautiful. We all think that's really beautiful. I think the humility of not knowing what you're doing and not knowing if you've done anything is really a key. You just show up and do your best. If you people still haven't said anything, I'd love to hear your voices. Mike and Maureen, that includes you two, if you want to.
Hello. I I really loved your explanation of what you do. You and the social worker together working with your patients. And I have done social work. That was what I did. And by the time I finished practicing, I knew enough to know that if I knew what to do, it was probably wrong.
You're a genius.
Thanks, Jen.
That's a real expert talking.
Thank you.
And there, one of the things that comes to my mind is a phrase that I've been thinking a lot around helping people through death, and I think it came up a lot with Gregory, who's a dear friend